But I would like to introduce now for the panel Filippo Ninno and Peter Konhäusner, and you know Filippo from the ETF. Then, I don't know, either Akehurst.
Yes.
I should have met you before. Yes, sorry. It's the OBE, the CEO Open Future of Skills Accreditation. That's interesting. Awards, Liverpool. And Peter Konhäusner is the Vice President of Gisma University of Applied Science, Berlin Higher Education, and VET in Germany, and India and the world. I think you have some aspects to discuss later on for your work. But Filippo, I would like to start with you. What do you think of the current situation and the development of micro-credentials? What are the opportunities and the obstacles?
Okay. We are loading a presentation. It's just a few slides. I can start, no problem. It's just to be more clear to see also visually. So when we talk about micro-credentials, at the heart of micro-credentials, one of the biggest challenges is the issue of trust. Okay. When we talk about trust, we talk about the trust of three key stakeholders. The first one is the trust of the learners. The trust that their micro-credential will provide with the competence required by the labor market and will be stackable, and they can use it to actually develop, achieve a big qualification to actually make a career move. The second is the trust of the labor market. So the labor market trusting the companies that employ and trusting those micro-credentials actually have behind it, the people who has those micro-credentials have the competence that are described in the micro-credentials. So the old issue of quality. And the third one is the trust of the public institution of the government, which believes that is in your key, in the USB key you have the presentation.
Sorry.
Which have the USB key? Where USB key is?
The key.
I didn't know, so.
Don't worry, it takes a second.
So it's your presentation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem, no problem.
PowerPoint.
See. Just while they are working on it, if you might be interested, the ETF developed a publication with guideline on how to design, issue, and validate a micro-credential based on the recommendation that has been implemented by Gunnar. I think it's interesting. It's a short document. It's very practical, and it describes how, in an ideal world, we would love micro-credential to be used and designed. I talk about an ideal world because the issue of micro-credential is we all know it's hugely important for us, but at the same time it's complicated to follow the structure that we design in the European context. As often the European context, exactly, here we are. So this is just, okay, why they're important, I think it's obvious. I mean, they are booming. I mean, this is just an unreadable graph from massive online courses which moved from 0 in 2012 to 20,000 in 2021. It's not booming enough because the participation in adult and continuing training is very low. Even in Europe, it's one of the most advanced regions. We are much below our standards. So we define objectives for 2025, 2030. We work a bit like the Soviet Union with these multi-annual plans and targets. And we don't reach them, so we are far away from the targets that we've set. And it's going to explode. I mean, the possibility delivered by artificial intelligence is probably going to make the market explode, which makes much more difficult to control the market. Okay, and the needs of the labor market is going to explode because the qualification, the occupational standard are going to change so often because new artificial intelligence means and tools will force people to actually change what they are doing in the workplace. So it's both the sort of need that we have to deal with, an opportunity of what the AI can do, but at the same time a huge challenge. How do we control this explosion? So here again is the three main stakeholders that have to deal with the trust of the micro-credential. And these are the two extremes, okay? So the two extreme scenarios. The first one is a state control, structure, quality assured trust, okay? So that's if we want to design an ideal scenario, that's what we're looking for. Huh? So the micro-credentials that respect all the 11 criteria that Gunnar presented. In this case, of course, you have the highest possible level of trust because, I mean, for everybody it's clear that micro-credentials is quality assured, respects the labor market needs, it is stackable, so the level of trust from all the stakeholders is top. The quality of the micro-credential is high because you have to actually demonstrate that the quality is high. There's a flexibility in the lifelong learning process because these qualified micro-credentials are stackable. So in these all these elements are there. At the same time, this is quite rigid system. And it's quite difficult, depending on the context, for the providers to actually invest in developing micro-credential if that's the process. So you want me 1.5 years of process for a 2 months course that I ask 70 euros per participant, I'm not doing it. There's a huge problem in many countries of not lacking offer of continuing training because the quality assurance system for continuing education are the same as for initial education, which means the providers are not interested. And continuing training is market-based. No, you do have some subventions from the national government, but in general, it's people paying to participate, and the providers are people who actually do it for money. So, oh my God. Sorry, that's 1 second. So it's the main problem in creating a rigid structure is the lack of offer. Okay, that's and of course each country is different, and you might have countries where the provider are super structured, they don't have any problem, and the system work. So the fact is you have to find a balance for each country to determine what is your priority. I work in Moldova, and the main priority was to have an offer of continuing training, because even when you had active labor market policies, like we do have money for unemployed to participate in training, there were no training available, because the system was quite rigid and they had to pass through the whole quality assurance regulations of initial education. So you have a problem of lack of innovation, because for especially small providers, it's so complicated to get into the game that they don't. But maybe those small providers have brilliant idea and they are quite flexible and they are working in small sectors where these micro-credentials are very useful. But if I need to become a superstructured provider, because if I have to face those quality assurance mechanisms, I need to be very structured, then it's more difficult for me to enter in the game. Completely from the opposite side, you have a liberalized system where the trust is mainly based on the provider credibility. Okay, so this is a program from Microsoft, give me a certification, I'm a coder, I go to a company, the company fully trusts it because it's from Microsoft, etc. So in this case, the trust and quality of the micro-credential fully depend on the provider. So you can't really say in terms of system analysis if the system is working or not. It really depends on the provider. The higher the cost, more likely that the quality of the training is good, and so on and so on. So it's completely different scenario. You have a much bigger quantity because it's quite easy to provide training. So I don't have to face all the complexity of quality assurance system, accreditation, etc. And you have a lot of innovation coming from small companies, small NGOs, small training providers, etc. In most cases, countries actually end up in a in-between situation. So, as I say, it really depends on what are the priorities for a country. And I would say, as you've seen from the presentation of Gunnar, there are very few countries who have established systems. So countries are experimenting. And experimentation, you need to learn in which direction you have to go. Flexibility, more quality assurance, and you probably have to change over time. It's going to be a wave in one direction and then coming back in the other direction, because it's impossible to manage. the complexity, especially without evolution, is going to be impossible to actually regulate 100%. And you have to strike a balance between having a lot of offer and having a quality assured system. Country examples. So I provided 3 country examples for countries which are choosing different directions. Again, as I say, these are experimentation. Croatia went for the first scenario, so they had represent a state control structural model. The Adult Education Act introduced micro-qualification within the formal TVET and adult education system. They are aligned to the national qualification system managed by the National Agency for Quality Assurance. The quality assurance followed the same procedure as full qualification, where public voucher schemes encourage participation. This approach ensures a very quality-oriented micro-credential. It is, of course, complex and bureaucratic. Inevitable. Austria represents a hybrid model. So since 2019, non-legally regulated vocational courses can be allocated to the Austrian National Qualification Framework. This enables high-quality provider-driven training to gain national visibility and recognition. So what did they focus here is that providers which are accredited have their own quality assurance mechanism. So they rely on the quality assurance mechanism of the providers. So even if we allow you to refer your micro-credential to the NQF because we trust your quality assurance system. This is a typical approach of systems which are historically very structured and trusted TVET system. Okay, so you will see Austria, also for Germany, similar system can be applied. For other countries where you don't have this historical strength in the providers, of course, this is a difficult model to adopt. Rwanda is even different. Rwanda offers an example of non-formal but NQF-linked trust building. The Rwanda TVET board develop short modular training programs aligned with the national occupational standards and mapped to the Rwanda national qualification framework. So the micro-credentials are developed. So you can decide as a provider to deliver that micro-credential, but you don't develop the micro-credential yourself. Okay, there's a list. Okay, I'm able to deliver the micro-credential, and I'm going to do it. So what the focus here is to make sure that these micro-credentials are linked to the NQF, they are stackable, I can use them to actually build a full qualification. So the priority there was reducing the fragmentation of offers, saying, okay, you are free to deliver it, but you have to choose the micro-credential that we have structured. So it's a different approach. The focus here is to allow informal workers to acquire recognized competence that can be later stacked towards full qualification. Okay. So these 3 examples are completely different. If you go country by country, you will see so many variations of several models. There's not a right one. It really depends on the context of the countries. What is your priority? I would say for me, that's just my personal position, is that we need now a huge offer because we don't have enough continuing training. I understand that we, especially for our educational system, you are used to quality assurance, and inevitably we structure models which are based on this ideal approach of everything has to be in place and has to be controlled, etc. But for me, the first priority is really to have an offer that allows people to participate in a flexible way. And we have to monitor it closely how much the AI is going to bring into the game, because it's a big opportunity. It is a risk, but it's also a big opportunity. At the end, our society needs more lifelong learning. We have recognized it, we put targets, but we don't achieve the targets. And we have been failing on achieving the targets for 15 consecutive years. So I think it's time to move a bit the focus on the quantity of lifelong learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Filippo. And now, before we come to the stakeholder approach, I would like to ask, because she's from an accreditation institution, so what is your perspective or your situation? How do you think about these, what Filippo just mentioned?
So So I'm Chief Executive of Open Awards, and so we're an examination body, and we're accredited by Ofqual, the Quality Assurance Agency, and we've been delivering micro-credentials for about 45 years. So I'm quite chilled about it, really. We don't always call it micro-credentials. Some of that will depend on the way that the funding works, because it's important to use the right language. And here in the UK, we're in the middle of a big shake-up of further education and higher education and how they link better together. So we'll probably be changing our language, having just changed it to micro-credentials, again, anyway. The drivers for us are, we are recognised by UK government, so we have our reputation to protect. So when we allow people to develop micro-credentials that we're prepared to accredit, they have to go through quality assurance. Twice, really. So once they have to be recognised as a provider that we're happy to work with. So do they share our values? Have they got the right policies that we need? And then secondly, we would move on to look at the micro-credential. And I think that is where we are reasonably relaxed about the size of it, and it will depend on the audience. So we see it very much as something that somebody might do alongside a course. So here in the UK, the traditional way to go to university will be 3 A-levels or an access to higher education diploma. And for some of those courses, medicine, dentistry, it makes sense if people want to get a head start, because not everybody who applies gets in, that they just run some courses alongside that gives them a better chance of getting their application at university. More often, it's employers who have recognised, I'll just shout, I think, so apologies for those of you online, but more often it's employers who have particular needs, no, that one's not doing any better, who have particular needs. So that might be that they want to recognise work that is going on in their organisation, and experience tells us that employees value an internal house course if it's recognised externally. So a lot of employers will come to us for that. Increasingly, we're working alongside employers who have the same needs. So a basic introduction to AI. What is it safe to use? What is it not safe to use? What you should be looking out for. And then the other, and this is where our history takes us, is where that people will do it either because they're looking to upskill. So they might have been an architect for 25 years, and all of a sudden people are talking about green skills and sustainability. A particular need, and so they want to introduce something, and so they might work with us to do it. And increasingly we're also starting to talk to universities. University, Tony's here, we've had lots of conversations about new funding that is coming in, and again, how do we work with those universities, because not everybody aged 40, 50, carrying responsibilities up and down, is suddenly going to go, do you know what, I've got new funding available, I'm going to go back to university to do a 3-year degree course. But what they might be more interested in is some shorter micro-credentials, maybe that they can do online, but certainly they can do part-time against those responsibilities that is enhancing their employability. And we do all that with a digital badge at the end of it, and we have our own portal, and that's the way that we run digital badging. So I think I'm a bit more chilled about it than other people because, as I say, we have a long history, and that's where we came from. Are we going that way?
Just to say that if you see the examples of Australia, I mean, countries which have developed national qualification frameworks decades before the others are more used to the modularization, qualification-based learning. So inevitably they are, as you say, you have been doing it for 40 years. You're in an advantage position.
Yeah, thank you for this statement. And now I think we should come for a moment to the problem of VET. So COVIS, for example, like the European Union recommended for the development and recognition of micro-credentials. And I think Peter is the right one to speak about that because he's not only from the University of Applied Science, but has also relations to that system. And I think perhaps some ideas how the collaboration could be improved so that we have a bigger chance to make, let's say, a bottom-up approach as well.
Yeah, thank you, Gunnar, and thank you, Heather and Filippo also for the nice input. Yes, maybe, I think for universities, generally for the higher education system, the whole micro-credentials can be a really nice opportunity on the one hand side, but on the other side, it's also a major threat, or many see it as a major threat. I think especially the public universities see it more as a threat, right? As some kind of disruption of the standardized system, right? Basically, they have just adapted to the Bologna process, and now there's another disruption coming in, so they see it a little bit in that regard. And it is actually a threat when you see that if you're not quickly evolving, and you're not part of the system, but you try to stand against the system, because micro-credentials, this is something that is happening, right? You see it, okay, Filippo says that we have not had achieved the goals for 15 years, right? But on the other side, there is a lot of micro-credentials coming out already for a long time, but there are more coming. On the other side, I think for universities, it could be also a threat if you are cannibalizing your own programs, right? Which can happen, and some of the players are doing that. But on the other side, especially as a private university, which we are, we see there's an opportunity, first of all, to see new revenue streams, right? New business models, and also to tap into markets where we say an own degree does not make sense, right? Especially when we're looking at upskilling and reskilling, and we say, okay, maybe we want to go into psychology or we want to go into the medical services, but we don't have the resources and also not the approach to do it now directly. We can test the waters with some micro-credentials there, maybe. And because you said, okay, what is the approach? How do we collaborate with BET, right? And I think we have a practical, I told you before, right? We have a practical example how we did it. So basically in 3 dimensions, right? The first dimension is we are talking with different governmental and official stakeholders, for example, with the Economic Development Agency in our region, and they have a lot of need for micro-credentials because they are being approached by many employers, and the employers say, look, we want to upskill our workforce, but where do we do it, and where do we have the trust that the education is in a good way, right? So they want to collaborate. But this, as we said before, is maybe more a long-term approach, because you cannot do this in a non-bureaucratic way, right? Because you have to build the trust. This is the one dimension, so with governments and authorities, ministries. On the other side, we have direct industrial relationships, where different companies say, okay, maybe we are interested in executive education long-term, right? But short-term, we want to have some micro-credentials because it's easy digestible for us. So they basically approach us with a customized set of skills they want us to deliver to their employees. And we are telling them, okay, we have some courses that we can deliver, or we are developing something new with them. And the third one, and this is the practical example which we have done just a few months ago, is that we are collaborating with some vet schools or vet-oriented schools. If I would call them a vet school, they might say, okay, they are not, but basically they are really vocational training oriented. And we have now done basically the exercise of transferring 15 of their qualification courses into micro-credentials and into accredited micro-credentials. This was a 3-step approach. First step was we identified which courses are matching the skill set that is also requested by students and by graduates, etc. We prepared all the paperwork for certification, which was a lot of work actually, because they have the basic framework for the courses, but you have to then go into the qualification frameworks, you have to put it into the readable format for the certification, to follow the standards, etc. And the second step was then the actual certification with FIBA-A, we did it. That was a 3-day event actually. So 15 courses in 3 days, quite some fun. So we formed some clusters, right? And had cluster experts, also faculty coming in to represent, because the FIBA-A actually said, okay, it's nice that you want to offer micro-credentials with an external partner together, but actually we don't care about the external partner, right? Yeah. You are the one that is under scrutiny here, right? And you are the one who is selling that, you are the one who is delivering the provision, and you are also the one the people will have to trust in, right? You are the higher educational authority. And this is why they really, these 3 days, like, this was completely in detail in every aspect that they asked us. And the third step will be that we are now going to the market and see what is the feedback. So we are offering the courses for free for our own students to have some kind of upskilling and basically some kind of sidestep in their educational journey. They can earn some ECTS, so it's accredited to ECTS with 2.5 credits per course. So the modular approach works there, but we did not want the ECTS to basically outrank our own courses, because our own courses have normally 5 ECTS, and the micro-credentials has 2.5 ECTS, so 2 of the micro-credentials would equal one course. You can do that, and you can basically build in that regard your own curricula if you want. Yeah, I think this was it from the beginning. So.
Yes, one question, what you mentioned, it's interesting, these sort of ecosystem, and what I think is, who are the teachers? Are they from the vet school or from the...
No, they have to, so this was also an accreditation or certification requirement, they come from the university.
Okay, because in our case, there are big demands from the companies to get more courses in terms of micro-credentials,
yes.
let's say. And these courses could be taught by our teachers, because we have these study integrated apprenticeships. But what you said, it's really interesting that the university is the umbrella, let's say.
Yes.
and that's really good, because we talked of EU-Air, and there is a big project planned, for example, 6 COVIs, and they have the problem as well. How should we structure the ecosystems? And so that's really a good example. Do you have some sources for the public, some links also where they can read more about your system?
So for sure. So you can go to Gisma.com,
yeah.
right? Gisma.com, and on the one hand side, and subscribe to the newsletter, for example, and then you will get informed as soon as everything is ready. We're preparing the landing page for the micro-credentials right now. Then everything is there. But basically, as now I think 2 days ago we got the final report from FIBA-A, and now we have to implement the last couple of changes. For example, it was also what you can do is actually you can hire teachers from another. So as a university, you can hire teachers from outside, but they have to undergo your quality assessment, right?
Yes,
And
okay.
these could also come from a vet partner then, but basically it's not allowed to say, okay, I'm partnering with them anyway. They also put a lot of effort into analyzing the partnership agreement we have with this vet school, right? So everything from the financials to also the IP management, everything was there really detailed out and had to be detailed out, which was also quite interesting, I would say.
Yes, I will call you.
Call me anytime, Gunnar. Happy to, yes.
Because we have this collaboration with the university, and this is really interesting. Yeah, thank you.
But one last sentence, so absolutely happy, right? The interesting thing for us was also, it's basically, you go into untapped waters, and it's also for FIBA R, it was also in that regard somehow a premiere, right? And it was
yes,
also
okay.
something that they did not do in that regard before. So everybody's learning, right? Lifelong learning also for accreditation certifications. Wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One remark to your statement, Filippo. We have only in one area we had something like micro credentials or further training modules. It was only in harbor occupations, and they are stackable and they are recognized by from the companies, and that's really really working. But it's the only area for this, like you mentioned.
There are some very technical qualifications, for even transnational qualification, like International Welding Association. So when it is crystal clear for the companies what are the requirements, everything is much easier. Because then the trust is automatic. I mean, this is the certification. If you've got these the competencies, we know exactly which job are you doing, etc. Also, where the companies come to the university says we have needs, that's the ideal situation. It makes everything so easier. Sometimes the policymakers who need to go and beg to the companies, please tell us something. They make studies, then they're not able to use the studies, then they have to translate, send the studies to the university. So sometimes when you have systems where the companies are active, it's super easy. And the most advanced situation would be, but that's again, it's a bit challenging, is when the companies already basically know who's going to basically file. Because, I mean, at a certain point, you cannot keep, with all the changes, you say, these 15% that I will not need them anymore. If you know it in advance, you can retraining through active labor market measures people before shocking them, because you get unemployed. It's personally, it's not that easy. I mean, it's a shock. I mean, if you manage to give new competence to people paid by the active labor market measure by the government, because the companies already tell you, I already know. I mean, these people from 45 to 55, I don't know how to use them in the companies in the coming 5 years. So that would be really the ideal scenario, because it's okay before you actually fire them, we can already work with them. So this is really the easiest context in which to work. Is not easy at all. I mean, as you see, it's a lot of experimentation. I mean, it's difficult, but at least this is a very good starting point. For other countries where you don't have this connection to the employers, it's even more complicated, because you're really trying to guess.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to come back to one point you mentioned, and that's the platform. Could you explain a bit, because is it a platform that it's not free of charge, it costs something, and so on and so on, and what do you think about a system that could be, for example, recommended for the EU or the projects within the EU?
So we have our own system, we call it a portal, and we run all qualifications through it. So for providers who work with us, whether that is formal qualifications or whether that is through micro-credentials or we have some other product services, then that is just made freely available to our providers. So once they're registered, then they can use that, and then we can use that to create paper-based certificates. Some people still really like paper-based certificates and e-certificates, and digital badging is increasingly more popular because people like to stick it on their social media accounts straight away.
Thank you. Yes, at the end I think what I'm interested in is this free of charge platform from Skillman. How could we promote this, or what about the competitors? Also, I think perhaps Giovanni can say something.
Not now.
Not now. Okay. So he will avoid this. Okay.
I'm the next speaker, so I will do it.
Okay. Thank you. So I think the question is, how could we promote this in a way that we have more credentials, micro-credentials, so that we can distribute or market in a way these, because at the moment I think it's really not well known. So Stefania told us a bit about this, so I can guess how does it work, but on the other hand it's not well known in the public.
So I think part of that is you're at the mercy of government policy. So for the very first time we saw the words micro-credentials appear in the UK's government's industrial strategy. So that was about setting where they see growth areas and a long-term plan. And for the very first time we saw government speak about micro-credentials and their place in achieving growth. They've moved on from that, so we have something in the UK that larger employers pay what we call a growth and skills levy, which is used towards, well, has been solely used towards apprenticeship. But there has been a very recent announcement that employers will have more choice about how they can use their growth and skills levy. And again, micro-credentials, which are now being called, I think, apprenticeship units, are being talked about, so employers will be able to choose. And here again in the UK, employers can choose to spend their skills levy not only on their own employees, but people who are in their supply chain. So here in the Liverpool City region, there's been a big drive to encourage all employers to come together, and where they can identify funds that aren't spent, rather than return them to the Treasury, they can be reallocated to other employers in the Liverpool City region. So I think a lot of it does depend on government policy at any one time.
Thank you. Peter, one question. What is your wish, let's say, or what would you say, what is needed to move forward in the future with, for example, your approach?
That is a very broad question, right, Gunnar? But I think, we spoke about this briefly before, and I think it also comes out here, right? You have a multitude of offerings at the moment in the micro-credential space, and it should be even more, I agree. On the other side, you also have to look at the quality, and the quality has to be high, because other than that you lose the trust, right? Because micro-credentials is also something like a buzzword at the moment. Everybody is doing it, so how can you ensure, and maybe also linking what Heather just said, how can you ensure that if I'm interested in micro-credentials, that I'm getting into a training program where I'm sure that I get something from a buck, right? I think in that regard we need some standards, and Skillman can be such a standard, absolutely. But I think it's just a competition of aggregation, because there are many platforms, there are many offerings and many standards as well, and one standard will then prevail. It's like all the time, there are many standards, and at some point there's some aggregation, and then it's coming to that. And I think if you talk about the wish, I think it would be good to have common standards, which are not too bureaucratic, right? So that you can also respond to industrial needs. But on the other side, you get also feedback in time from the learners if this is what they want and how it can be applied. Because we all need that, because it's a booming industry in that regard, and we need these success stories, right? Not only at the platform level, but also on the learner level, so that also the employees and employers say, okay, this is the micro-credentials that we need, And this was, we are waiting for, and it's not just a buzzword that is nice to have. Because at the moment it's, I think many of our students are also saying, okay, why should I do micro-credentials? Because I'm already doing a degree, and even as a graduate, it's more a quest to send out more CVs than to make more micro-credentials, right? Apart from, and I give you that, right, it's nice to have the digital badge on social media and on LinkedIn and everything, we see this as well, right? But for some people it's also just a complete mess who has more credentials, right? So in that regard also a single micro-credential is losing the value that it has. Because it's just, you do more and more and more, it's just like achieving some experience points in some computer game, right? It's not something else, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, concerning the content of micro-credentials, I think our experience is that perhaps in transversal skills area, it could be really an advantage. For example, our students, they work with Scrum from the beginning, they work with design thinking and all these things, but it's a holistic approach. You're an IT specialist at the end, but what do you think if, for example, Scrum is a credential or other things, for example, could be, I think, really an advantage. I don't know what you think.
Maybe, sorry, Filippo, but maybe one thing that just came to my mind, ideally, right, and this happens now more and more, is that a student comes to us and says, okay, I have now just recently graduated and I have now this job offer in this company, but to take this job offer, they want me to be upskilled in digital marketing, right? And then they come and say, okay, where can I get this micro-credential? Then they make a 3, 4, 5 week or month course and they have it and then they get a job. This not only on the career side, but also on the academic side happens also now. For example, some student wants to do the master then at the technical university, and the technical university says, okay, you did not have enough mathematical skills, right? So you should do an upskilling in mathematics. You gain like 5 or 10 ECTS more and you can enroll into this master course. So something like this, if this comes more, I think these are really the success stories that we need.
Yes, and to add something before Filippo get the floor, we had a conference and with a representative of Otto. It's a big enterprise. And he said, for example, for AI and other things, you need mathematics. So there are new needs for the employees as well to upskill, and I think that's really important as well. But now, Filippo.
There are two issues. One was mentioned by Gunnar. I want to elaborate. We have to be a bit careful, especially for initial education. What we focus on is not only what you are doing, what you need to be doing, but how you do it. So you have this key competence behind, and it's very difficult to extrapolate the technical aspects from the how. It's easier when you then go and you talk about macro credential, just specifically very technical skill that I don't possess, like digital marketing, and then you get that one. So this is, I think, it's not that simple. It's not really like a Lego set that you combine. I mean, that's how we like to explain it because it gives the idea. But especially when we talk about initial education, we have to be a bit careful. The other point is that one way of, and some countries work like that. I mean, one way of ensuring the trust is that it's not the provider who does the assessment. Because of course there's a conflict of interest. You pay me, I give you the you pay me, you attend the course. If you're not really able to do it, then fire you is not my problem. Now, as for the companies who say, okay, but I mean, if whether you really base it on the credibility. I mean, if I take people with your accreditation and they're not able to do the job, I just don't value your accreditation anymore. So that's where you have Microsoft, which is quite tough in giving you the certification, for example. Or you create, or it could be the employer association, could be the government, could be a partnership, an authority, which says, okay, we test the people. Okay, so and we provide. So the provider role is basically to train as well as possible the students to pass an external examination. So That's one possibility of doing it. But you see, there are so much complexity in terms of the accreditation provider, the validation, the assessment, the recognition. I mean, it's very difficult, and that's why countries are experimenting, and that's why we have so much interest to each other experimentation, because we really want to do it, but at the same time we have to try to do it properly. And the problem is that we will need to change it on a regular basis, because it's an evolving world. There's much more need to continue training. There are much more opportunities with AI, so it's a continuous effort. The funding is a big issue. Okay, one of the reasons people don't do training is it's expensive. So we spend all the public money in initial education, and now we understand initial education is not enough. It should give me the key competence, but then the technical competence that are changing so fast, we have an idea that your qualification is really valid for 4 or 5 years. Even in countries which are very solid process to develop qualifications. There's just because the world changed, not because the providers are not good. So we have 35 years of work where your competence are not valid anymore. So the funding issue is a major one, and how to actually move more funds from initial education to lifelong learning. It will also create a bigger market for micro-credential. Be very honest, when you look at lifelong learning, it's very non-equal, because those who go to continuous education is because usually they are already graduated, they have a good job, they can pay for it, they want to make a career. It's not for people who are unemployed or people who have very humble jobs. Usually those don't get part in lifelong learning. So the equality issue of micro-credential and continued training is a big issue. That's not on employers, mainly now on the government and public policies. But if you don't address that aspects as well, I mean, it's difficult really to create a demand, which is really from all levels.
Thank you. Perhaps one last word from Liverpool.
On anything in particular? Just I hope you have a really nice time in Liverpool.
Now, you've heard here some different aspects of micro-credentials in different countries and so on and so on. What is your impression on this?
Sorry, so I think it means different things to different people in different places, and I think there is nothing wrong with that. The issue is when you're seeking government funding, and I think when you're looking for government funding, it needs to be very rigorous, it needs proper quality assurance, and absolutely it needs to be trusted. But I do think there is scope within all this for different things that mean different things to different people, and that's just the nature of the world. And I think to pick up on a previous point, micro-credentials is a buzzword that we use at the moment, but actually short, sharp courses that deliver is something that's been around probably since Plato, I would suggest.
Thank you for this last word. Perhaps there are questions from the audience. Please.
So just picking up the point.
No, wait, otherwise
Yes.
nobody will hear you from home. Sorry.
So just picking up the point that Heather's been raising, I mean, apologies to raise a sort of very ugly practical question, but do the numbers stack up? What Heather was just raising was actually seeking state funding for this. And I'm just wondering, do the numbers stack up if this is a market-based approach in terms of the production costs versus the demand? Because I was working in distance learning 40 years ago and working out that the cost of producing a course in a distance learning mode was 4 times that of producing a course that could be delivered in a face-to-face mode. And so I am thoroughly on board with the principles of short, sharp, micro-credential learning, but I'm having difficulty persuading in my university that actually the numbers stack up here.
So This is a loaded question from Tony because he and I talk about this all the time. The numbers will stack up once lifelong learning entitlement comes in for a university-based setting and we understand more about it. But what I would say is developing an online course is so much easier with AI now and the tools that you have. But I know people want to come in on that.
A small comment, and also because Gisma is part of a bigger education group which is acting worldwide, and we have one partner institution which is called FutureLearn, and FutureLearn is only based on distant learning, right? And what they are doing is basically franchising courses from established institutions, providing them an additional revenue stream and channel to reuse, right, and recycle the content that they already have. So I give you that if you do it from scratch, it's maybe four times the effort, but maybe there are other ways to make it still up to a certain standard and reuse something that you have already done before in some regard. Yeah, but I think there is a business case. But in the end, what I said before, also I think it's a numbers game. So if you have, I think FutureLearn now has 1.2 million users or something like that, right? And so basically, as long as you have enough users on platforms, then you can make decent money out of that. Yeah.
Filippo.
Sorry, yeah, I was just probably going to mention the same exact thing about AI. It is going to change completely. I mean, and what you can do with AI now is not what you're going to be able to do in 6 months. So if already now the AI can do like 20-30% of the work, it's going to be 40, then it's going to be 70. So it's very difficult now to make scenarios building on this, but what we know is going to be super cheap to do it in, let's say, 2 years' time, if you want to be extremely careful. So this is going to change. And another question, but that's up to policymakers, is do I want the government to be a player into it? Because if I leave it to the market, of course, even universities which are public, when they have to deliver continuing training, they become private. They do for income generation. Do we think that if we think life learning is so important, the government should actually be a provider with political prices for some part of it? I don't know, it's political questions, so everybody's free to answer, but I think it's something that we have to put on the table.
Thank you. And there's one other thing that came to my mind, and it depends sometimes on the teaching and learning approach. So we have, for example, a blended learning environment, and it's totally in projects, scenarios on different levels, and you have all the resources online. And I think to develop this or further develop is not so expensive. It's a difference to the e-learning modules in former times. For example, they were really with heavy workload. Yes. So I think we are at the end. Thank you very much for your statements, and it was a pleasure. And I will give the floor back to